It's been really fun watching your work. And I'm kind of excited because I think that there are a lot of questions that people have, particularly about models, because obviously we all look at them in the magazines, on commercials, on TV, and they all have a certain look that all of us want to really achieve. So I kind of am curious when these management companies send you these models, are they like, hey, we need you to tweak the color a little bit, or is it kind of like the reality TV shows where it's like a complete overhaul makeover where they're going, oh no, what did you do to my hair?
Well, I think obviously every client, every model, everyone is different, right? So it kind of does depend per person. I would say mostly when we're doing a whole change, it's generally when a model is newly signed to an agency. So say if I get signed today, they're like, okay, well, you need highlights because you're not going to sell for any commercial stuff. So then they would send the model to, Bianca Color, me. And then they would send her over and they would say, hey, what are you thinking? We think it's too dark. We think she's not going to sell, which is also a really interesting thing because I didn't realize this years ago. A model had come to me and she's like, hey, my agent said I'm not selling because my hair's too dark. And she did a bunch of catalog work. So when someone does catalog work, when something's dark, it draws to the darkness. So like your eye is drawn to the darkness. So having highlights and movement made them sell the clothes more. Does that make sense?
Interesting.
So that was really interesting to me too. Yeah.
So it was like a dynamic color that was drawing the eye as opposed to the clothing.
Yes. And so they're like, okay, we need to make her hair a little more like, a little highlighted, a little more inviting, a little not so dark. So I did that and she's like, oh my God, I've been getting booked so much more. So things like that, there's little tricks and stuff. So I learned that about if someone's doing catalog work, meaning like someone who would sell for or be in like Revolve or, like things like that. Things, catalog.
Clothing stores, catalog
exactly.
work. Right.
Yes.
Where they're selling a clothes.
Yeah, exactly. Where they're like selling an item. And then something that's a little less inviting or needs to be less inviting is something that's a little bit more like high-end, high fashion couture. So say maybe like Chanel or something. They can have a dark black bob or, a fantasy color pink because they're looking more so for the like artistic view opposed to something that's going to sell to the mass market. So that was interesting. And then what's really funny is that a lot of the times, so we call it like model behavior, right? So I have an itch, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So we call it model behavior. And so sometimes models will come in and they won't talk to their agent and they'll say, hey, yeah, I'm good to go. Let's take me dark or let's take me platinum or whatever, right? The extreme say. And so I'm like, okay, like, yeah, sounds good. What do you like? What project are you working on? Is there a reason why? And they're like, oh no, it's like, we're just going to do new digitals. I'm like, okay, then I'll do it. And it looks amazing or, whatever, it's different. And then their agent will be like, yo, did you just make her platinum? And I'm like, yeah, like, I thought that was the plan. And they're like, we did not okay this. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. This is what I thought was like the new, like, I thought this was the new plan. And so this is model behavior. And we all like joke about it and laugh about it, but this has happened to me a couple of times. And a couple of times the agent was like, yo, did you do this? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, well, we didn't okay it, but we love it. And she's selling more.
Ooh.
So thank you, so that's always a good twist. And then I'll hit up, whoever that client is. And I'm like, hey, I just got yelled at. And they're like, no, I'm selling more. I'm like, you're right. But next time you have to check in.
So do you find that sometimes when they do a drastic thing like that, that they might like cross over, say, from catalog work to something else by doing something?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so sometimes that's what the model, themselves actually wants to do. And that's fine. But generally, if, your agency is the one that's booking you jobs and paying you and you're contracted, you should be running it by them. So that's just kind of funny. But yeah, that is something that does happen sometimes. But for the most part, it's a team effort. So sometimes I'll even have one of the agents on FaceTime as I'm consulting with the model because sometimes they don't know all the right lingo, whether like something gold to them is like orange or, something ashy is not to them. So they don't always know. And so sometimes, the agent will then pull up a photo and be like, see how you can see how it's a little bit, too warm or whatever. We need to calm that down because, editing. Okay. So color for a model or somebody who's going to be on film is much different than somebody who's not. So obviously,
but it seems like everybody wants to have that color though.
Yes. Okay. Well, we have to also keep in mind that everyone's always getting photoshopped. So yes, these girls are beautiful and they're flawless, no doubt. But there's always Photoshop. So for instance, with Rachel Barnes, I've been doing her for years. We've taken her really blonde, and now she was kind of more brunette blonde, and we just
changed it recently, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we just took her a little lighter again. But what happens is when, so they're always on film, right? They're always taking these photos of themselves or having these photos taken, and that's their job. So having somebody in real life, you're seeing real light. So whether that's you're in an office or whether you're outside at the pool or whatever it happens to be, right? But on film, it's a completely different realm. It's a whole different world because you have all these outside factors like editing and, putting cool tones in or putting warm tones in.
And all the different lighting to the studio.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So all these things change. So when somebody is showing me a photo of their hair and they're in their bathroom and it looks like a, very, very warm or something, it's because they have an orange light. And then they're showing me a photo of this, this model outside at the beach and she has these like golden highlights, but it's not brassy. And I'm like, yes, but these are completely different environmental changes. So editing totally changes the game because, for instance, Rachel Barnes, I have to tone her extra ashy because she has tan, she's a very tan girl. So when they are editing, they're adding warmth to her. They're not adding ash because it would make her have like a gray tone. So they're not adding ash, meaning they're warming it up. So the hair is also going to get warmer too. So to prevent it from looking brassy, you have to add in a little bit of ash to counteract that.
It is interesting because I do know, and I would imagine a lot of our listeners have had similar experiences that when we get our hair done, like for instance, I have my blonde. When I first get it done, it is a very ashy, very, very ashy, which means it has a little bit of a gray undertone. If I go into my bathroom, it has a yellow light. I know it does. So suddenly it doesn't look quite as ashy. If I go outside, my hair is white. And this particular, it's, it's mellow, it's cool, but it's not overly so. So lighting really does make a big difference. So I think you have to kind of think about what is like somewhere in between if you're doing it at home, like if not at home, but like in real life.
If you're having daily wear and tear, right? If you're going to be in the office, if you're going to be, at a restaurant, if you're going to be at the pool, it's totally different. Because even I'm sure, as you know, if you took a photo in your bathroom opposed to taking a photo outside, you're like, oh my God, it's if you're turned around, it's two different people, right? So yeah,
I guess that's why there's so many filters on Instagram and whatnot.
Oh my God, I know, it's crazy, right? Yes. And that's a whole other thing because like now we have this like surreal, unrealistic view of what beauty is, first of all, but also like what is actually realistic because we have all these filters that, there's even a hair filter where you can like change it to like pink or blue or whatever it is, blonde and stuff. So
fun, though.
There's all these things. Yeah. And I love it. So when a client does come to me and she's like, I want, mint hair. And I'm like, well, let's try this out. Let's see how you actually feel.